Dan Shulman, voice of the Jays and Canada basketball, because I didn't get to speak to you during the Olympics, and I'm selfishly going to carve a bunch of this segment, most of this segment, into Canada basketball stuff. Good morning, Dan. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm doing well, man. So, yeah, I guess your thoughts on Joey Votto's retirement, that hits you as you're doing the game.
Yeah, I mean, given the fact that he was not hitting, much at all at AAA, I don't know. Like, I had kind of, I guess, moved past it a while ago, to be honest with you. Like, if he had been healthy and had come out guns a-blazing in April and let's go, and, it's a whole different story. But there was the ankle injury and the setback, and it had taken a long time, and he was hitting about 160. And I think they're in a different place now, right? It's about next year and the young guys and all that. So it honestly, I wouldn't even say it hit me. Like, I read it and I went, oh, okay. Like, it didn't, it hadn't been on the, the forefront of my mind. I mean, he said, obviously it was a marvelous career, and I believe it's going to be, like, I think he'll wind up in Cooperstown, whether it's first time or later on, I don't know. But it didn't come out of left field for me because of the way things had been going at Buffalo and where the team is right now.
Yeah, no, I'm completely with you. Plus, I know you're just rejoining the team and you're back around them now a little bit because of the Olympic break. But from just the outsider's view, the guy who watches the games on the couch and goes to the ballpark, the team does seem like there's a completely different clubhouse vibe right now, that the young guys are having fun. They're trying to take advantage of the opportunity. Some guys are having some success. Some are obviously really struggling. But either way, you can kind of feel this transition phase working from the Blue Jays. And then to take a young guy out to put Joey Votto in for like a ceremony, I don't know. That seemed like a no-brainer for me. But the thing I go back and forth on with Joey Votto is because this sort of, I won't say it's been like Vince Carter-esque, because Vince Carter was had 14 teams that he returned to Toronto on, and we ran commercials for him on national television for like a decade. Thank you, Vince. We did a Netflix documentary, but there's a little element of this where because the retirement process has been a little drawn out, the will he return to the Blue Jays question from, I guess, almost even 2 years ago to the retirement today, we've spent a lot of time discussing Joey Votto's legacy, and I'm curious where you kind of stand at the overrated, underrated element of this, because I think he's probably one of the greatest Canadian athletes that not a lot of people actually really saw, because how many people were really watching Cincinnati Reds games on a regular basis? Yeah. And so he's like just someone that you process through numbers where you're like, yeah, this guy was one of the greats. He's one of my favorites because the numbers were good and he's Canadian. I just don't know where he lands for me, at least emotionally. How is he for you?
I mean, he was a great player, and it's funny. Had he had the identical career 10 years earlier, I think he would be overlooked and underrated, because back then, for first baseman, you had to hit home runs. And I'll give you an example. Fred McGriff hit 493 home runs. And never got close to the Hall of Fame the traditional way. He had to go in through the Veterans Committee, or whatever they call it now. Had Fred McGriff hit 7 more home runs when he was an active player, he'd have been a first ballot Hall of Famer, because he'd have gotten to 500. That's the way thinking used to be about the Hall of Fame, and especially for a first baseman. Votto bridged the gap. Like, he started he was ahead of his time, really, analytically. I mean, if you look at it. So he started when it was all about home runs and RBIs. But now, as he's finished, we totally get it's about whether you want to use on-base percentage or OPS plus or weighted runs created plus or WAR or all of these things that some didn't exist and some we didn't give much thought to when he started. So, had Joey Votto been 5-10 years later, I think he'd be looked at even better than he is now. As it stands, I mean, I'm not any more emotional about it. You use the word emotional, I think, but I'm not any more emotional about his career than, had he been from Indiana or San Pedro de Macorís, to be honest with you.
I'm with you on that.
Yeah, but he was a great player. Yeah. And I believe he's a Hall of Fame player, and it would have been a nice story had he been able to come back and play and do well with Toronto this year, and and all of that. And a lot of people, we don't know everything. Like, there's clearly an element of he wanted to do this the right way. He didn't want to be handed anything this year. right? If he had the desire and the clout to be handed something, he would have been handed something. But he rode the buses for a while, and I give him credit for that. So, but obviously he didn't. You could see in his Instagram post or whatever it was, that he thought he didn't warrant a call up, and I think the word he used was awful. I would have been awful had I been called up, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think he says I'm not good anymore. I was like, it's
right.
fine.
I give him credit for that, but. A great career, and it would have been nice to see what had happened if he hadn't stepped on a bat in March. But it turned out the way it turned out, and I hope in a few years we're talking about him being the third Canadian going into the Hall of Fame, because I think he's had that level of a career.
Yeah, it always felt like Vogelbach was a placeholder for him, that they really wanted Votto to be that guy on the roster. But I guess, you go, it's unlucky he stepped on a bat. But I also look at it through the lens of, but if you're the age where you step on a bat and it takes you out for 6 months, it's probably something else would have happened. This isn't.
Well, and the other thing, too, is Spencer Horwitz could have been up 2 months earlier, too, right?
Yeah.
And if we're playing hindsight, and back then it wasn't about 2025, it was about 2024. And I know Spencer Horwitz didn't have a good spring. But Spencer Horwitz is a big league ball player, in my opinion, and I think he's proven that. And so they had a lot of left-hand hitting first baseman DH types, and really, Horwitz only got the call up because they couldn't ignore what he was doing with his bat, to the point where they said, okay, let's give second base a try and see if that's okay. So, if Joey Votto had been from Indiana or San Pedro de Macorís, I don't know that the Blue Jays are the team this happens with, right?
Yeah,
so
I think that's pretty clear.
But maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. I have no idea. But anyways, it's too bad it didn't work out for him to find a way. I was not in the camp of the ceremonial thing, especially against the Reds. In fact, if you had forced me to say, I would have been like, not against the Reds, it didn't work out. I give him credit for driving to Toronto. Apparently, he drove to Toronto yesterday to see a bunch of his old buddies. But it's a great career. What else is there to say? It's been a great 17, 18-year career for a second round kid from Etobicoke, and congratulations to Joey Votto. Just a marvelous 17 or 18 years, fun to watch, and made us think about the game a little bit differently. Again, I think he was ahead of his time intellectually, analytically, in terms of how the game should be viewed, and he deserves some credit for that as well.
I think you nailed it with that part of it, which is how I will remember Joey Votto, and it's through after you saying it, is he was the on-base guy. He was when I started to shift my brain into being like, oh, the Canadian guy is the MVP, and baseball people, right? Like, the hardcores, the real baseball people, the not me's, I'm an outsider. I'm just watching it. I have a couple cold Bud Lights in the stadium. The people who were like ahead of it, you're right, at that time around 2010, when on base started to become the primary thing, when we were starting to do Moneyball, they were like, no, Joey Votto, analytically, he's the guy. And from not seeing him regularly, because again, I'm watching Blue Jays games. I just don't watch Cincinnati Reds, and they weren't in the playoffs regularly. I don't have core Joey Votto memories.
Right.
He really was consumed through numbers. And so you learned about him through those numbers. He helped teach you about those numbers. And then as a Canadian baseball fan, I would say specifically, there's probably a lot of people like me who, started to embrace that shift away from just average and home runs to the other stats because of Joey Votto, or at least in part because of Joey Votto. Okay, so you said the Spencer Horwitz thing, and this is a quick one, and then I want to get to just a couple quick Canada basketball things. Is he the guy that most interests you? Like right now, it's kind of hard to pick narratives that you really care about. Like obviously Vladdy continuing the success, seeing Bo again would be great. But out of the young guys, the guys that were called up this year and getting their opportunity, who intrigues you the most? Like when they get up to the dish or when they're out in the field, who do you care most to watch right now when you're watching the games?
It's a good question, and I won't say Spencer Horwitz only because we've seen like 300 plate appear or whatever.
And it seems pretty clear he's a major leaguer, right? Like maybe a bench guy, but that he belongs in the bigs.
I think he's at least a platoon guy. I think the question is platoon or full time. So I'd put him above bench guy. I mean, I'm driving, so you may have the numbers, but he's like a 770 or 780 OPS guy right now, I believe. And listen, baseball is a cruel sport, and a guy can look good one month, bad another month, good one year, bad another year. Like, we know that. But I think his work ethic, his intelligence, the adjustability of his swing, which is something everybody talks about, his game planning, he's good. He's good. Like, is he going to be an all-star? Maybe not going to be an all-star, but can he help a team? Absolutely. Yeah. He can help a team. And I continue to say, and I hope Spencer makes a lot of money playing baseball, but at this point, he's making minimum, basically major league minimum. Slightly above average players or above average players who make major league minimum are very, very good assets to have because that frees up money to go out and get other guys to fill the holes that you have, and they have. So I'm a big fan of his. But in terms of who intrigues me the most now, I'm not going to say him just because we've seen him for like 250 plate appearances.
It's
Joey Loperfido,
251 plate appearances, and now it's a 791 OPS.
I mean, 791. Yeah. So if you're on the right website or the whatever website you're on, OPS Plus has to be in the 120s, I would think, or something like that. But 791 is really good in a year where the average OPS is like 700. So, but the guy who intrigues me the most, I guess, right now, because we haven't seen as much of him, is Joey Loperfido. That's the guy I really want to see. I think he's got a high ceiling, but he's also got more holes in his swing than a Will Wagner or Spencer Horwitz had. He's a totally different kind of player, right? He's probably more of a power guy. He's more of a speed guy. He's more of a toolsy guy than a Spencer Horwitz or a Will Wagner would be. And I think he's got every opportunity to be a big part of this going forward. And again, the first question is, can player X be a big part of it? Can he be more than a bench guy? Is he just a platoon guy? Can he be a full-time guy? Like, all of a sudden, after years where they didn't have much to speak of from the left side, they got left-handed bats everywhere right now. And the typical thing and the normal thing with a young left-handed hitter is, can he be an everyday player? Do you throw him in there against lefties? So, but first of all, I mean, we've got to see how he does against righties. But I'm very intrigued by Joey Loperfido. I'm intrigued because they don't have much power and he has power. And I'd like to see as many at-bats from him as I can the rest of the way.
So you're not just the voice of Canada basketball. You're kind of number one fan because no one that I'm aware of has insured, like, how many years ago did you insure that you were going to be able to call Canadian basketball Olympic Games? Like, is it 2001?
I don't know exactly. Yeah, I know. So Gregor Chisholm wrote an article about this, and I said that way back when with ESPN, when I was doing baseball full-time with ESPN, I sought a clause that said if anybody wanted me to call Canadian basketball at the Olympics, they would let me go. And now I don't do baseball for ESPN, so now it's moved over to my Sportsnet contract, and a big thank you to our Sportsnet bosses as well for allowing me to have that freedom every 4 years to disappear for 3 weeks. But
it's real generous of them. They were the ones who had the leverage in the situation, that's for sure. Anyways,
don't be like that. Don't be like that. So,
no, Dad, we need you calling the Jays.
But it's always just been something that I wanted to do. I could go back and dig up, go into the box in the basement and find the old contracts, but I don't. It was not before Sydney. I know that. It was after Sydney, so it's probably the early 2000s.
Yeah, early 2000s.
And probably. And it happened for Tokyo in 2021, which I did remotely. We weren't traveling then because of COVID, but this was even more fun because both the men and the women were there. For Tokyo, only the women were there. Yeah. I'm hoping if I do it again for LA, it's men and women, and hey, let's do well too, and do even better than they did. So it was super fun, but obviously, like everybody else, I would like to see them do better. The men's team, I think, is the one that stands out more because there was so much excitement about the men's team going into Paris, right? And they go 3-0, and maybe there were some warning signs then. All three games were close. And Australia, Greece, and Spain are really good. But the one thing, and I was talking to somebody yesterday, and somebody was like, boy, everything I heard was like lock for a silver, maybe a gold. And I was like, your sources are wrong, man. You need different people. So, and more than anything, I think this, if people want to learn something from this, it's how many good players there are around the world. how much experience and continuity in FIBA basketball matters, and how cruel FIBA can be because it's a one-and-done situation in the quarterfinals. So, even if you lose in the semis, you get to come back and try for a bronze. But, listen, Canada, the men's team didn't get as far as they would like. I think they will learn from it. I think there need to be some tweaks on the roster. Obviously, they didn't have a lot of size that they felt comfortable using in that game against France, but hopefully onward and upward in the next cycle.
Yeah. Is it hard for you? This is the last one I'll personalize to you, because I want to talk about some of those warning signs and then the future a little bit too. But so, again, this is something that you put into your clause where you go, I want this for decades. And, you're the real deal Canadian basketball fan where you want them to succeed. You want to call the games. You want to be a part of this. And I was thinking about you during the France game going, and you're a real pro. I couldn't hear it. But is it hard for you at all to not let the emotion seep in a little bit? Where I'm watching the game, I'm like, hey, maybe stop fouling Yabusele. That's that one. Or maybe try Nembhard because Jamal Murray's body looks like it's completely falling apart. Are you having any of those moments while you're doing the call? Or are you just so pro that you're just locked in? You're like, no, I can separate the emotion from this. Because I got to imagine, we talked about the Votto thing, and you're like, yeah, I don't care if he was from Cancun and I'm like, yeah, I believe that. But with Canada basketball, it's got to be a bit of a different challenge as a play-by-play guy where you're like, hey, how much of the emotion do I let seep in here?
Yeah, no, that's fair. And I haven't gone back and watched the game, so I don't know how I sounded in those moments. I mean,
I don't think you want to.
Yeah, I don't need to.
Yeah, it's good.
I guess the one thing I would say, and I don't know how much of the World Cup you were watching last year, but that was emotion on the other side, right? And like that Spain game.
Yeah.
So if anybody ever says to me, like, what are the 5 most exciting things you've ever done? The Spain game in the World Cup is definitely on the list and might be at the top of the list. And if it's like a person from the U.S. asking me, they'd be like, Canada what? Like who? Like where? But so, yeah, it's different. Yeah, it is different. I think part of the reason why, again, you talk about a marathon versus a sprint. What's more of a marathon than a Major League Baseball season?
Mm-hmm.
What's more of a sprint than FIBA, right?
Mm-hmm.
And them winning that game over Spain in the World Cup was incredibly exciting. Well, the game before, they lose to Brazil, and now it's like they have to beat Spain or they're in real trouble. So we went through a little bit of that in the World Cup. But, yeah, there's definitely some of that. And I'm not – I'm not embarrassed to say that. I mean, I love this. And I'm the guy trying to find the YouTube feed or the courtside 1891 feed when they're in Nicaragua. And you know what I mean? Like I'm that guy. So, this is just my little side thing that for whatever reason I've always loved. I would guess I concealed most of the emotion if I were to guess, but
you didn't sound pissed, which is the thing. Like you didn't sound pissed, which I think is the main thing where it's like when I'm talking about hard to let the emotion go out. Because when there's an exciting play, you get to go up.
I wouldn't say I was pissed. I would say I was,
I was
disappointed or sad or bummed or whatever. So, because again, even if they win that game, no matter what happens in the semis, they're alive for the last 6 days. Like at worst, they're playing a bronze on I guess it would have been the Saturday, right? And I'll be honest with you, nobody asked me this question before the Olympics, but if somebody had said to me, a couple of people asked me about their gold medal chances. And again, I didn't really think that was realistic.
Yeah,
and
they put into perspective when we watched the exhibition game against the U.S., I thought. It was like, right.
Yeah, and I know France played the U.S. really close, and I know Serbia could have beaten them. But going in, if you had asked me to rank teams, I would have had Canada fourth. I would have gone USA, Serbia, Germany, Canada. So I would have had France behind them. But again, I mean, everybody can take from all of this what they want. But Australia's really good, and Greece is really good, and Spain's really good. And look at what South Sudan almost did in the exhibition game. Like, there are lots of really good players out there, and it's not homogenous like the NBA where almost everybody plays the same style. Everybody's got different coaching, different styles, and the other teams, most of them are together longer than the Canadian team. And I give Michael Bartlett and Rowan Barrett and Jody Fernandez all the credit in the world. They had a long training camp. They did everything that they could do to have this group together as long as they could. But I think in the end, some of the Canadian depth that I thought was going to be a bigger factor just wasn't. And, we can have the Jamal Murray conversation. Obviously, he was not close to the best version of himself. They needed more there. Nickeil Alexander-Walker didn't play well. Kelly Olynyk didn't play much at all.
Yeah.
And so if you looked at, like, Shea was a superstar. R.J. Barrett was really, really good. Mm-hmm. Dylan Brooks was really, really good until the France game. Andrew Nembhard had one great game, and it was okay overall with one great game. Dwight Powell did what Dwight Powell does, which is great, right? But Dwight Powell is not a star player. He's a blue-collar guy.
Yeah, great guy, solid player. Can't have him be in crunch time in meaningful games. Like, this is a guy who was stapled to the bench the entire – and I know NBA is different, but, like, the entire postseason, he couldn't sniff a minute.
Right, and I guess my point is Australia and Spain and Greece and Germany and Serbia, they've got Dwight Powell-level guys too, right? So they may not all play in the NBA, but Dwight Powell, again, did great. He did everything you could ask of him. But after that group, there wasn't enough, right?
Yeah.
It's the second unit not only didn't extend leads, it struggled to maintain leads sometimes. So, listen, there will be turnover, and, next time I would expect Shaedon Sharpe and Benedict Mathurin to be on the team, and I think guys like Omax Prosper and Leonard Miller and Zach Edey are all possibilities. FIBA's a learning process, and this is the thing about FIBA, too. It can give you the highest of highs, but, boy, when you turn around, it can punch you in the kidney, man. Yeah. I mean, it's just, and the emotion is unbelievable. And I'm told that, the core is still totally on board and counting the days to LA and all that, but it's going to be a long couple of years until, they start seeking commitments and thinking about the World Cup and all that kind of stuff again.
Yeah, I'm with you. And so when you mention the red flags, like, obviously size was always going to be an issue for them. Like, that was one of the clear problems with the roster, and there's just nothing they could do about it. But it was predicated on small ball, and I think when you're playing FIBA, you got to have ball movement. I think the reason why when I say I wasn't just disappointed, I was pissed, is the way they came out in that first half against France, I thought was like, being pissed off a bull. You were able to be pissed off at it because there was just like no ball movement. And they just looked completely discombobulated. And I know you can probably attest to how crazy that crowd was. Ariel Helwani, his friend of mine, he was there. He was texting me that it was one of the most insane environments. This is a guy who covers UFC, who's been to like some pretty bananas events. And he was like, this crowd is insane. And I think he was also a little afraid because he did a segment trolling France fans before. And he had to like leave the stadium after the game and face those same people. But either way, they didn't look like they had an identity whatsoever other than, hey, Shea Gilgeous-Alexander is the best player on the floor in all these games, and we're going to hand him the rock. And then RJ had his moments, but it was like once the secondary guy wasn't there to provide the lift, it felt like pretty much everybody on the team didn't really have a defined purpose outside of the three guys that you mentioned who were successful. And I think if Canada is going to have success, and I don't know what it was, like that they weren't able to weaponize that more, but they've got to be able to capitalize on that depth. If you're going to have the most NBA players or the second most NBA players on the planet, that has to mean something materially. And so to me, it's just like the fact that Nembhard didn't feel involved, the fact that Kelly Olynyk, a guy who scored 32, and I know it was a long time ago, but who scored 32 points against Venezuela in a meaningful game, can't get on the floor for 2 minutes when you can't get any offense. It reminded me of what a lot of bad teams where you don't feel like everybody has a role to play. When it was the World Cup, it felt like there were all these guys, like Nembhard was involved and Brooks was involved and Shea. And, this one, it was like, we're going to let the ghost of Jamal Murray chuck a bunch of shots, and then Shea's going to try to save the day, and then hopefully RJ chips in. Brooks is going to play defense, but beyond that, nothing.
You made a couple of great points. I think France had a fantastic game plan on both ends of the floor. If I'm not mistaken, Batum was on Shea, and they put size on Shea, and I think they basically tried to take away his vision a little bit and make life difficult on him. I mean, if they had put one of the little point guards on him, like, it's game over. He's in the lane every time. Yeah. So I think they had a great game plan offensively too, which was Canada's playing small. Whoever's playing the four, Brooks or RJ, let's pound the ball inside. And like again, and you use if you're going to have the second most NBA players, and I get it, but you can't tell me that all 11 of those guys or 10 of those guys are better players than Gershon Yabusele.
They were not.
We saw it.
And now he's in the NBA. The Sixers were like, please come play for our team. And he's like, yes.
Right.
And he's going to be good.
And this is my point. There are so many good players who just don't happen to be in the NBA for whatever reason. And, he didn't do it against the U.S., but how about Isaiah Cordinier? I mean, the man was a monster against Canada, dunking on people, posterizing. He was great against Canada, great against Germany. There are great dudes all over the place. And I thought France had a great game plan. But, yes, Canada needs more size, and not only more size with mobility and physicality, because that's FIBA, mobile, physical, big guys. And I think if Sharp and Mathurin are a part of this, I mean, now you got bounce, right? Mm-hmm. You got bouncy athletes on the wings. RJ's a bigger guy. I don't mean like RJ doesn't have, you know what I mean? Like twos, guys who are going to dunk on people. And, you need listen, the United States probably winds up winning bronze if Steph Curry doesn't rescue them, right? I mean, they needed Steph Curry to rescue them to win the semi, and they needed Steph Curry to rescue them to win the gold. It happens. It happens in FIBA. The best team doesn't always win. The team that plays the best on that day wins.
Yeah. Dan, thank you for the time. Great job at the Olympics, and we'll be listening to the rest of the Blue Jays season. Thanks, pal.
All right. Thanks, JD. See you later.
Yeah, take care, man.